Today we're going to create bleepy, spacey, sci-fi leads like that. I'm going to show you step by step on how to set up this iconic techno bleep sound in Ableton Live using just a couple of devices. It's going to be super easy, it's going to be well explained and well worth your time. So let's jump right in. One more thing, if you are new to this channel, I have a free gift for you. It's called the Finisher Framework, my 3 simple steps that will help you finish at least one great sounding song per month. This will upgrade your workflow in just a couple of minutes and it will serve you for the next years to come. You can get it at pickyourself.com/framework. It's entirely free. The link is also in the description. Let's jump into the video now. Let me first of all show you what we have in this track. So this is the sonic foundation that we work with. Now our goal is to create a spacey, bleepy techno lead synth, this iconic sound that you've heard on many famous records. And it's totally doable in Ableton Live. There's just a few simple hacks you need to know, and we're going to use Operator. Now I know that Operator is one of those devices in Ableton Live that a lot of people are scared of because it seems complex, it seems not as approachable as some of the other classic subtractive synths, and it even feels more complex than the wavetable synth, for example. But honestly, this can be much easier than you think. I'm not going to do a huge lecture on FM synthesis. I'm going to show you practical tips on how to play with this. Just follow along and I promise you will understand this. So the way I have set up Operator right now is that I just have this main oscillator playing and the notes that I'm using are penciled in here. So this is all you need to know. It's a fast sequence. The only thing you need to know about FM synthesis for this tutorial to understand is that one oscillator influences the sound of the other one. So right now we're only hearing this one. If I activate the second one, this one is now influencing the other one by me changing, for example, the tuning. So it's not changing the pitch itself of this first oscillator, but it's changing the timbre of it. This is everything you need to know right now for this tutorial. And in case you want me to do a deep dive on FM synthesis using Operator, leave a comment below. I'm happy to do this. I just want to know if there's any demand for that. All right, I'm going to deactivate the second one, and we're just hearing the first one now again. One thing that I want you to activate now is this fixed button. So this will make the oscillator independent from the pitch that I have penciled in here. This is playing now. If I now transpose everything in octave, still hearing the same pitch. This is because I've activated this fixed button. Now this will make sense in a second, because what we're going to do now is we're going to load up the LFO modulation tool and we're going to map this to the frequency here. Now as you can see, the frequency is moving now. Let's listen to that. Still not really great sounding, but at least we get the connection. And the next steps are now going to completely transform this and turn it into a bleepy synth lead. So what a lot of people miss with this LFO tool is that you can actually change this from sine shape to random. Now this is giving you a stepped modulation voltage, and as you can see, the values are jumping now here. Let's listen to what that does. Getting closer to the results. I wanted to now activate notes and turn this to, yeah, let's say 16th notes. Now it's gonna get much more interesting. We're getting into bleepy techno territory here. What you then need to do is you have to figure out a good way to dial in the depth of modulation. So how extreme is the range, basically, the range of modulation. If I bring this down, here minimal changes. If I bring this completely up, it's jumping up like crazy. And with the offset here, we can basically dial in what the starting point of the modulation is. So do we want this frequency to start higher or super low? Now for the bleepy techno stuff, obviously if we create a lead sound, it makes more sense to have this dialed up a little bit. This is obviously atonal, so the frequencies that we're playing here, they don't correspond with actual notes from a scale. We could theoretically later on run this through some kind of reharmonization, but with bleepy techno, this is really important that you want to be a little bit atonal. What you can also do is you can add in a little bit of glide here by smoothing the waveform. So listen to that, it's now straight. You get this like drifting pitch, and it almost sounds like a lot of the things that you typically do with modular synthesis. Now, let's get to the next steps. This alone is still sounding quite boring. I'm going to de-solo and listen in context. Kind of random, not really interesting. There's kind of a character missing. And this is where the FM synthesis really shines, because we can now infuse character by activating the second oscillator and also the other ones that influence the first one. So here, this is basically the algorithm section that tells you how these oscillators are influencing each other. And we're on the basic one here, which means that this one is influencing this one, is influencing this one, is influencing this one. Let's just keep it simple and just play with those two for now. So already you can hear that there's a lot more timbre going on. We can also set this to fixed, and now it gets crazy, because what happens if we load in another LFO tool, do the same thing, and let's map this to the frequency of the second one. You see where I'm getting here? We are creating a lead sound that sounds very organic, very evolving. And to me, this is kind of the fine art of electronic music. How can you create something that has a little bit of that randomness, but without getting too crazy? Let's take this to the next level. What we can now do is we can change the waveform of the second oscillator that's influencing the first one. And for example, create a triangle. Or a square. Or a saw. So this is where we dial in a little bit more of the character. We can also even use some noise. I'm gonna stay with triangle, I think. This sounds quite good. And depending on how you set the depth now, this is how crazy the modulation goes. So I can just keep this very simple. So this is almost too boring for bleepy sci-fi techno stuff, but you get the idea. This makes total sense if you want to control how crazy everything goes. So what's really cool is that after you've adjusted the depth and offset settings, and by the way, I now synced this to 16s. Sometimes it sounds better. In this case, it was the case. It can make sense to play around with the envelopes here. So we're here on the envelope of the second oscillator that influences the first one. And you can find the perfect timbre for how spacey and crazy you want it to be. And find a nice FM sweet spot. Also, you can adjust the spread here, which means it's a little bit of a detune between the sides. So 2 oscillators and then spreading them out. And then you can take it further, add in one of the other modulators, maybe one more, and see if that gives you any additional benefits. So as you can tell, the signal gets more and more complex, more and more intense also. And by the way, this multiplication function here allows you to use a multiple of whatever you set here, meaning you can add in a couple of higher, or even lower if you use a division, overtones into the signal. So they are so high you don't even hear them, so I bring this down. Now in the final section of this video, I'm going to show you some of my secret weapon hacks to make this blend in with the rest of the music and also to make it rhythmically more interesting. And by the way, if you got any value out of this video so far, then consider liking the video, consider subscribing to the channel. This gives me a positive signal that I should keep going with this, that I'm actually creating value for you. So do that to show me that you want more of this. So the problem that we still have here, it's sounding like a machine gun. And you can make this rhythmically more interesting just by going into the MIDI notes and then deleting a couple of them. So for example, I do this here, delete these, and this. And then you can create variations of this. Just duplicate it, try out different versions, and then save them as different clips. Then choose the one that you prefer. So this is my favorite way of making it rhythmically more interesting. Another option is to make it much more sparse, like this. And then work with delays and reverbs. Now this is the perfect point where you can dial in the exact amount of modulation depth you want in, the exact amount of offset you want to bring in, and you can really start to see how all the different things that we've now created interact, because this is the beauty of FM synthesis. Everything kind of cross-influences other parameters, and if you want to get super crazy, you can also do something like this. Use an LFO tool once again, and then map the LFO to, for example, the depth of the first synth, so that the modulation depth is changing and being modulated by this LFO. So this now is an absolute secret weapon. It takes a bit of time to fine-tune this so that it actually makes musical sense. But if I'm doing this now, I'm making the rate quite slow. What you will hear is that some of the notes are kind of swelling higher and higher and then going back down. And of course, you can also adjust the modulation depth of this one. You can do this again using an LFO and mapping this LFO to the modulation depth of the other LFO. And now we're getting into territory that is just exactly why I love modular synthesis, but you can do all of that inside of Ableton Live, which is amazing. So I'll make this a bit slower, and we're now modulating this second depth. This then changes something on operator on the second oscillator. So listen to that. So this sounds absolutely amazing in my opinion. The last tip that I want to give you is that you can change this over the course of the song and use it to influence your arrangements. For example, this multi-parameter, if you want some part of the song to be in exactly that pitch that we have right now, but you want a slightly higher pitch or at least more overtones in another section, you can, for example, increase the multiple here. And then bring it down to the original multiple, so you can change this over the course of the song. It's a very nice arrangement trick. I hope you got massive value out of this video. Make sure to leave a comment below before you leave. I would love to hear from you. What do you think of this technique? Is there anything you would like to add? Do you have any follow-up questions? I read every comment, I reply to most of them, and see you in the next video.